Hello and welcome to Gettable, AFL.com.au's home of trade, draft, free agency and contract news. We are brought to you, as always, by Google Pixel. Great to have Google Pixel on board for season 2024. I'm Rioli Beveridge, and you might have noticed I'm all by my lonesome in the Gettable studio this week. That's because my co-host, Kall is up on the Gold Coast for the AFL's Under-16s Championships. Kall, how are you doing up there?
Well, thanks, Rioli. Enjoy this week, always. Lots of interesting moments. You see clubs and managers tucked away in the corners of rooms discussing different things, and you wonder, what can they be talking about? So hopefully a little bit of news spills out over the next coming days on what those discussions actually are. But always a good week, and watching some footy as well.
It is always a good week up there on the Gold Coast, and you've been lucky enough to interview Leo Lombard, Gold Coast Academy prospect, as well as the club's recruiting boss, Kall. We'll get to those interviews in just a little bit. But Kall, we want to start with Askable, brought to you by Google Pixel. You ask the questions, we answer them. Hit us up on Instagram at Gettable, 2 T's. We'll answer as many as we can over the next little bit. James wants to know, what is the latest on the top free agents on the market? There's only 3 restricted free agents left, but there's plenty of unrestricteds.
Yeah, Cam Zurhaar is the one that a lot of people are talking about, wondering where does this one sit and where does it land? Has the 5-year offer from the Roos, but interest is building, I think, and it's probably that last man standing element too that I think does add to the interest, because at the start of the year, I didn't think there was much of an appetite from him to move west. I think that would be more of a possibility as the season goes on. What does the past month of North form do to that decision as well? Really interesting case, Zurhaar. Ben Ainsworth choosing between the Gold Coast and the Bombers, which we've spoken about previously and revealed in recent weeks. Still think that one's got a little bit to play out. Harry Perryman has significant Port Adelaide interest, which we've been all across throughout this year. And Josh Battle, the feel remains more likely to go than stay, particularly given the fact he's taken it off the table until the end of the year. But those are the main talking points out of the big free agents. And Zurhaar, I'm just fascinated to see which way it goes.
It is going to be an interesting one to watch. Felix wants to know, is Dylan Shiel more or less gettable after last week? Back in the side, had 26 disposals and 6 clearances against Collingwood. It's pretty impressive.
Oh, it's a great question. He was back to some really good form, as you say, particularly in the second half last week. I still believe he's very gettable. He has 1 year to go on his deal. Has most of his money, his big money anyway, paid for and throughout that deal, given the Bombers have had salary cap space in recent years. If Essendon could get something for him, I think they'd have to look at it. Still gettable, and potentially more so if he performs, because probably more value and potentially more suitors. So then the Essendon decision is, well, are we comfortable losing him given the depth that he offers? But I don't think he wants to be a depth player. Just on the Bombers, Nick Cox also closing in on a new deal with the club, likely a 2-year extension through to the end of 2026. So good news coming there for the Bombers. They tick off some of those deals.
Good news for Nick Cox as well. Swizz wants to know, should West Coast offer overs for Jack Graham so that Richmond gets better compensation so they don't have to trade as much for Liam Baker? What are your thoughts there?
It's a clever point. The vagaries of the compensation system are always pretty unique. Under strict AFL rules, no deal can be connected to another deal. So it would be closely red flagged, I think, that one by the AFL. But it does open up the question around, one, what Jack Graham's doing and his appetite for moving west as well, and the Eagles looking at him. And also the Liam Baker situation for me is just really, really interesting. I wouldn't be trading pick 2, which they have at the moment, to help get Liam Baker. I think, if it meant getting 2 early picks, then I'd probably be tempted. And I think the clubs at the top of the order are tempted in splitting for 2 early selections and using on draftees. But if they did the split and turned 2 into, 8 and a later pick, and turn that other pick into Liam Baker, I'm not sure I'd do that, given he's 1 year away from free agency. The Dockers are still in the Baker hunt as well. Also on the Eagles, it's been drawn out, but expecting Liam Duggan to re-sign soon, likely around that 4-year mark. So I think that one's pretty close.
It certainly is. You mentioned
that one for you, Harvey,
has
put in. Yeah, Harvey has put in a question as well for you, Riley. Will Mitch Lewis's injury affect how the Hawks attack their off-season?
Yeah, look, I'm not too sure. I mean, we know they're in the free agency market. I watched them on the weekend against the Cats, and for all of their improvement this year and for how well they've done, I wonder if going to the draft is still prominently on their mind, and whether or not, obviously, clearly they're going to be after free agents. We know they're in the Josh Battle market, and Bailey Smith as well. They'll have to trade for Bailey Smith. But I wonder if the man you mentioned before, if Cam Zurhaar comes onto their radar now, given the fact that Mitch Lewis has gone down. I think he suits that forward line in the sense that he could complement Mitch Lewis when he does get back. He's a different type of key forward, but he could also hold the fort for next season while Mitch Lewis spends time on the sidelines. So I wonder if Cam Zurhaar starts to come into their thinking a little bit and whether they enter that picture. Bailey Smith's clearly going to be on their radar as a midfield option and Josh Battle as a key defensive option. So clearly they're looking at all three lines. But yeah, I look at Cam Zurhaar now and think, could he be someone that could potentially figure in Hawthorn's thinking back half of the season? What do you reckon?
I like it. And also the other factor with the Mitch Lewis decision too is, does it affect their draft strategy? So they have pick 6 right now. And as you say, into Bailey Smith, which would take their first round pick to be used in some capacity. But if they hold, do they try and trade back for a couple of picks? Could they be an option for Gold Coast to bundle up their picks, get into pick 6, get in ahead of the Leo Lombard bid, which we asked Kall about shortly, and see what their appetite is for that. So, and then do they move back and see what they can grab with some of the tools? The Whitlock boys could be in the teens. Harry Armstrong is moving up as well. Jonty Fall has returned from injury and done pretty well. Job Shanahan keeps kicking goals as well. So there are some tools in that back half of the first round that could be interesting choices for them, and particularly if they split the selection.
Well, Kall, on the Google Pixel, the Magic Editor feature lets you reimagine your photos right on your phone. So, Kall, I want to know, if you could magically edit Richmond's list with the number 1 pick, which under-18 star are you making a Tiger?
Well, it's a race of Richmond and West Coast for the number 1 pick now, isn't it? So after North Melbourne's past month, they're out of that race. It's really intriguing for me which way the Tigers take it. And I've been quizzing recruiters over the past few days about who they'd have at number 1, partly because I've got my fandom form guide coming out next week. I'm interested to see if I'm on the same page, but also just to see what their take. And there is absolutely no consensus. So lots say Josh Smiley, but also lots say Finn O'Sullivan. Some have even thrown up Luke Traynor as well. Levi Ashcroft in an open draft would be around there, but won't get a bid at number 1 as a father-son. Jagger Smith and Murphy Reid probably not too far behind, according to some recruiters. Look, I think it's out of still Smiley and O'Sullivan. If you're going to magically edit up the number 1 selection, add them into the Richmond lineup. But yeah, I think you can't go wrong with either of those two players, and both offer something different. I'm interested to see how Finn comes back, because I thought Finn O'Sullivan was really, really good in the second half over the weekend for Vic Country. He was tough. He was important in their win. He started to get his hands on the ball as well. But we know that Josh Smiley has done that throughout the season as well, particularly for the Eastern Rangers. And Sunday's game at Marvel Stadium, I'm rapt to see the final deciding game move to Marvel Stadium as well. Gives everyone a really good chance to perform, and looking forward to seeing those two go head-to-head. Potentially, maybe it is the number 1 cup between Smiley and O'Sullivan over the weekend.
The number 1 pick cup. We look forward to that. Well, Kall, you are, of course, on the Gold Coast predominantly for the Under-16s Championships. And Paul wants to know, who are the early standouts from that Under-16s draft class?
Well, I watched Dougie Cochran play yesterday, and he is a star in the making. There's no doubt about that. The son of Stuart Cochran, of course, who played for North Melbourne and Port Adelaide. Unfortunately for both those clubs, didn't play enough games to register and be eligible as a father-son. He's a tall defender who played in the midfield. He had 25 disposals, 6 clearances, kicked at both feet. He can go forward as well. He's done that at Sanford under-18 level. So he is a very, very, very exciting prospect, and he was the one that everyone was looking around going, whoa, who's this kid yesterday? So he's the one that's pretty shot up. Vic Metro boy Archie Butler, which is a great name, kicked 2 goals, 2 from 20 disposals. He's got some real talent as a half-forward and midfield option. And Cody Walker, we love the father-sons roles. And you'd be happy about this one as well. 26 disposals, 7 clearances. The son of Andrew Walker, who was in the crowd yesterday watching his son play. The Blues have a pretty exciting player coming through next year. So 2 years' time, sorry. So those ones are good. And also Aidan McCartney too, the son of Jason McCartney. He is eligible to North Melbourne as a father-son, but also eligible to the Swans as a academy player in 2 years' time. He kicked 3 goals a couple of days ago as a key forward. So a few on the market there with some familiar bloodlines.
Hey, just on that, I heard a whisper filtering down here in Melbourne that Cody Walker might have been tagged throughout that game, Kall, in an under-16s game.
Well, it shows you going pretty well, doesn't it? It didn't stop him too much, though. He was the best player for Vic Country. Both the Victorian teams were well beaten yesterday. South Australia and West Australia performed really well. But, yeah, there's a lot to Cody Walker's game. He's got some real power and class, and we've seen that at different stages already this year.
Taylor wants to know, who are the midfield options who could be on the trade market? Because we did our 35 players last week, Kall, and I think it was noticeable that there were quite few midfield options among them.
We know that the market has dried up a bit, hasn't it? And Bailey Smith's chase, obviously, between Hawthorn and Geelong is where things are headed there. But and the more clubs you speak to, you more think probably Geelong leads that race, but Hawthorn's still in it for there. The rest of it's gone a little bit cold, as you say. It makes me look at the contracted types who can't break into the midfields of AFL teams at the moment. And I know that's what clubs will be doing as well. So Will Brodie has 2 years to go at Fremantle, but is stuck behind some stars there. Could AFL clubs take a look at him and bring him across to a third AFL club? James Peatling at the Giants is out of contract, but has impressed when he's been in the team at different stages this year. So he's another one I think clubs would be looking at. I'd also expect clubs to take a look at Elijah Sardis. Now, would they try to prize him out of the Bombers if he can't break into their midfield? Sardis is an inside midfielder by trade, clearance player. He has some senior players ahead of him, clearly a top 5 pick from a couple of years ago and signed for 2 years beyond. So ultimately, he'd be up to the Bombers if anything did eventuate there. But I'd expect he'd be a player that clubs would be assessing and saying, well, if he can't get a game in their midfield, could he get a game in ours?
Nick wants to know, who should the Crows take with their first selection? It looks like it could be a top 4 to 6 pick at the moment.
Good players around that part of the draft. There's going to be a lot of people linking Sid Draper to the Crows, and he's probably right around that frame. Obviously, a South Australian, All-Australian as a bottom major, won just about every medal last year in South Australia. So he's right around that rung of players. But I think Murphy Reed's pushed himself right in there. Our man from last week on the show, Jagger Smith, will be pretty close there too. And Sam Lawler is a player as well, I think, who's going to definitely rise up the ranks and be in that group. He was really good over the weekend for Vic Country at Brighton Homes Arena. Kicked 3 goals from about 15 disposals and stood up in some big moments. Had an interrupted season so far. So he's one I think that could push into that territory too. Luke Trainer's another name that could be in that mix. So if they hold their spot, they're in a nice draft position.
And last but not least, Yusuf wants to know, is it likely that the Saints would target a tall forward in this year's trade period?
That would be part of the mix, yeah. If Josh Battle leaves, they obviously have to target more of a key defensive option as well. But I think there's probably those types out there, and they're capable of coming across. Key forwards is harder, and as we spoke about last week, there aren't too many available and up for grabs, particularly out of contract. And I don't think the Saints would be giving away any draft capital to make these big calls happen. The one that gets linked, obviously, is Rory Lobb. 2 years to go. Has been moved back, as you wrote about in recent weeks, and interviewed him last week. I still think there's a reasonable chance that move happens, and there's some takers out there, and I expect St Kilda to be one of them. And also whether the Dogs let him go. Again, they have control over that one. What happens with Tom Barrass will be interesting in that factor too, given the Dogs' chase for him is real and significant, and maybe the changes at West Coast as well. Who knows what that impact that has on a few things at the Eagles. But also on the Saints, before we finish up, Lance Collard closing in on a new deal at the footy club too, draftee from last year, likely to add another couple of seasons to his deal through to the end of 2027. So some good news on the horizon there for the Saints.
Very good news for the Saints. I also wouldn't be surprised if they're in the Matt Owies conversation at the end of the year. St Kilda, as that contract situation rumbles on. All right, Kall, as we mentioned off the top of the show, you've had a busy week up there in the Gold Coast, and as part of today's Gettable, we're going to get to a couple of interviews that you did earlier in the week with Gold Coast Academy prospect Leo Lombard and the Suns recruiting boss Kall Burns.
Up on the Gold Coast here, I'm with Leo Lombard, member of the Gold Coast Academy and also the Allies. Leo, tell us about the championships that's just been and finished, because it was a great time for you and your performances were really strong. How did you sort of assess them?
Yeah, it was good. Obviously had a pretty consistent time throughout the championships. It was pretty good, and yeah, loved playing with the Allies boys. It's so good how we got together and got really close during that short period of time, and it was good. Yeah.
Love watching you play over the last few months, in particular just the power and aggression you play with. Tell us about yourself as a player, for those who haven't seen you play.
I'd say I'm an explosive, tough player who can play inside and outside. Love to use my run and carry when I can, and yeah, love to bring my teammates into the game as well.
Who are the AFL players you watch and try and take some things from their game and chuck into yours?
I try to have my own style of play. Obviously have a look at Touk Miller, a bit of Zach Butters as well with their explosion out of the contest. So yeah, love them players.
You mentioned the aggression and strength. Obviously that's a big part of it too. You look like you enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, no, it makes it fun, you know, just throwing your body weight around. So yeah.
And you've been a part of, obviously, the Gold Coast Academy for a number of years now. Tell us about the involvement there and how important the Suns have been in that development.
Oh yeah, I've been in the academy since I was 13 years old, so it's so good to see how far it's come. Like obviously with Jake, Ethan, Jed, Will, it's pretty inspiring for us boys.
How did you watch them last year? Like obviously all first round selections and come in and played some good footy, all of them. How did you find that when your own ambitions were, at stake a year later on?
I just felt like I could do what they do, to be honest. Like obviously got to play with them in the Talent League games as well, so I love those boys and I get really close to them.
Now you've played some great VFL footy as well, which has been an advantage for you, and you've been able to show your wares there too. Out here you kicked a great goal against the Bombers a couple of weeks ago. Talk us through that one.
Oh, I didn't really think too much of it. I think I play better when I don't think, so I think that was pretty instinctive.
You took them on though.
Yeah.
How many bounces?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
I reckon you do know how exactly. That's all right. You've been modest. Last year though, in the VFL Grand Final was an outstanding performance. You were 16 and you won a VFL Premiership.
Yeah.
How was it going into that day? Were you nervous? What were the feelings like heading into that game?
That's probably the only game I haven't been nervous in the
Really?
past year or so. I didn't really have any expectation, obviously coming from a 16-year-old, but the experience was surreal.
What's it been like over the last couple of weeks as it looks like you're creeping up the draft board as well?
Yeah.
What sort of talk have the Suns given you around the future and whether they want you at the footy club?
I haven't had any meetings with the Suns just yet. I have a meeting with Kall on Friday, so yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty keen. They're pretty keen. What about other clubs? Have you spoken to them over the last few days and weeks as well?
Yeah, I had a few clubs in yesterday at my house, and yeah, we've got a few more during the week.
Do you like to benchmark yourself against the better players in the draft pool? And we talked about some of the better midfielders that you played against and played very well against through the carnival.
Yeah, obviously playing these national championships, playing alongside Sid Draper, Jagger Smith, Finn O'Sullivan, Semi Layla, all those players. I love to challenge myself a lot. So playing up against the best makes me a better player, I reckon.
Did you aim to go as high as possible in the draft?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Is there some players over the last couple of years that you have watched, step into AFL footy pretty quickly out of being in the draft and think, I could do that as well? Do you feel like a ready-made type of player?
I still think I've got a bit of work to do. Obviously, can't expect going in straight away. But looking at Will Graham and how well he's been going lately is just pretty inspiring to me as well.
Who are the senior Suns players that you've sort of spent some time with over the last couple of years and learnt from?
Yeah, so I did the pre-season this year for the academy, and I really looked up to Took Miller, Noah Anderson, Matt Rao, that midfield group, but James Cheetahs actually took me under his wing a lot and taught me a lot of stuff.
What about Noah and Rioli? Obviously two really early picks a few years ago. Tell us their influence.
I don't really know, they're just so professional on and off the field, at training, in meetings, everything, so yeah.
Now, championship's done. What's the next period of the year look like for you? Do you go back and play some more VFL footy for the Suns?
I'm going to have a couple of weeks off and then I'll get into VFL games, so that should be pretty fun.
All right, thanks for coming on the show, Leo. We have a present for you, as always. Good throw. Good catch as well. Put this out. You are now officially Gettable, Leo, so
Thanks
put this
so
one
much.
up to the camera. There we are. Next up is Kall Burns. Now joined on Gettable by Kall Burns. We appreciate you coming on the show again, Kall. That was Leo Lombard. Obviously, it's been a fantastic season for him. Tell us about his development from your eyes as a footy club.
Yeah, excellent. Leo's been in our academy since the age of 13. He's acquitted himself really well. So obviously we saw him in the VFL Premiership last year with us, and then taking the step forward this year with his AFL Academy commitments, and an excellent carnival for the Allies where he was named MVP. So Leo should be really proud of himself.
Where do you expect the bid to come for him at the moment? What's the senses at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. To be honest, it's where the other clubs view Leo. That's sort of for them to determine where the bid comes, and we'll wait and see how that plays out more towards the draft.
How does Leo's form this year shape your own plans, though, given you've got the 3 first-round picks and 3 early selections? Is that an interesting element to trying to get in ahead of it, where that could sort of shape things out?
Yeah, it's a good question, but it's something that we're used to. I mean, last year you saw with the 4 boys, we had to position ourselves really strongly to be able to acquire those. So we'll wait and see, and again, we'll do our work and make sure that we're in a strong position to go either way.
We're at the under-16s, obviously. One of the games being played at the moment. Tell us about the 16s Gold Coast squad that we saw on Tuesday.
Yeah, going really well. I mean, probably at this stage doesn't look like it has the top-end talent we've had in the last couple of years. That can be a number of reasons, and particularly I think because we've had a couple of strong draft years ahead of them, maybe they haven't played up. and had that opportunity to play against
Yep.
kids older than them. So they're still finding their feet, but again, they still have 2 years to develop. So we'll keep watching them closely.
We're seeing more and more academy successes. Obviously, the 4 boys that Leo spoke about earlier and yourself, but Bodie Euland's a player who's probably come from the clouds a little bit this year. Tell us about his story.
Yeah, come for the clouds for the competition, but probably not for us. We tracked him really closely through our academy program. He was unfortunate to be struck down with a few injuries through his development years. So, look, we kept supporting him and working through that, and knew when it came to the crunch he was going to be an important play for us. So, I guess with a strong body of work under his belt through pre-season, and then being able to run into the year this year, you've seen a really good output from him. Really proud of him, and obviously a Rising Star nomination this year.
What's the form guide telling you about his brother Zeke and where he could land next year? Because we've nicknamed him Zeke the Freak. He looks a really exciting player for the 2025 draft, and a member of the academy as well.
Yeah, he does. And another one that should be proud of himself. He was able to play in the Allies this year as an underage player, and has already played some VFL footy for us too. So Zeke looks a really exciting player off half-back, doesn't he? And also push through the midfield from time to time. So looking forward to seeing more of Zeke.
Kalani White is a member of the Gold Coast Academy. It's a really interesting situation with him, given his father's son rights at Melbourne, but also his involvement with the Gold Coast Academy too. He played one Allies game during the championships. Tell us about his development and involvement with the Suns.
Yeah, another one where it shows the academy is such a great vehicle for these players to get exposed to top-end talent and the pathway system. So we engaged Kalani. He obviously had strong basketball background, so it was great to get him in the doors and give him exposure to the top-end facilities, the AFL players, and get exposure to them and learn from them, and also come through our academy with the under-16s last year and then the 18s this year, and some Allies exposure too. So really excited for Kalani.
Still waiting on the AFL's final decision on the bidding system changes, potentially this year, whether it's next year as well, and how that all plays out with the new draft value index. What's the club's view around how that looks for this year and what impact it'll have on the Suns, particularly with Leo?
Yeah, I mean, as a club that's had to use the DVI really closely the last few years,
You become attached to those numbers.
we have. We know them off by heart. There's been a lot of spreadsheets. So look, we feel like whichever way it goes, we've had our say. The AFL's asked us for what we think, and we've given that feedback. But no matter which way it goes, I feel like we're a club that's used it really strongly and will continue to use it strongly, no matter what the determination is.
How are you viewing the 2024 draft crop more broadly?
Yeah, look, it looks probably an interesting pool. The top few have maybe separated themselves. We've still got one game of champs to go. The top few, I feel like, have separated themselves. Then potentially it's quite even from maybe 3-4 onwards. So, look, still a little bit to play out, but it looks a good draft. But yeah, probably a little bit more even than we've seen the past few years.
Are you seeing those names similarly to what we speak about? Josh Smiley, Finn O'Sullivan, Luke Traynor amongst those top group?
Yeah, they're the names that have pressed their case through this last month of football. Jagger Smith, maybe another one you could add into there.
Murphy Reid.
Yeah, Murphy Reid, exactly. So look, those guys are starting to separate themselves, but there's still a lot of footy to go, and we'll keep watching them really closely.
We spoke a little bit earlier about the plan with Leo and the bid, but also having these 3 early selections. Are you a chance to bundle them up and try and get up earlier? Are they on the table for trades? How proactive do you be with those selections this year?
Yeah, we should be. We should be really proactive. They're the conversations we're having, looking at the draft pool closely, what players might be accessible there, but also with the trade. Can we attack the trade period? Can we bring in the players that can really help us go to the next level?
Daniel Rioli and Dustin Martin, 2 Tigers, as the siren goes for one of the final games here at People First Stadium. Daniel Rioli and Dustin Martin have been linked to the footy club, one contracted at Richmond, the other one out of contract, a free agent. What's the interest levels from the Gold Coast Footy Club?
Yeah, I think you heard from Damien in recent weeks around Dustin. Obviously, he's got a decision to make, but I think, as Damien said, we'd be crazy not to look at a player of his ilk if he was to want to come to the Gold Coast.
And Rioli?
Probably similar, to be honest. I mean, he's a contracted player, so we'd be crazy not to want to improve our list, and that's what we're always trying to do.
Ben Ainsworth, one of the remaining restricted free agents in the pool. Is any update on where things sit with him?
Ben's got a contract in front of him, and Ben's also got a decision to make, but we're mature enough to understand how it works in free agency, so we'll just wait and see how that plays out towards the end of the year.
Speaking ahead, we always like to look ahead, Kall. In 2025, there's an emerging star of the competition in Mac Andrew coming out of contract. Do you start talks with him to try and get him signed up long term, given how well he's been going this year? Obviously a top 5 pick from the 2021 pool.
Yeah, he's going really well, and we're really impressed with him and proud of him for all he's achieved this year and hopefully for many years to come. So, look, we'll continue to monitor his situation on his contract. They're the kind of players that we want at Gold Coast for a long time.
How's it been working with Dimmer?
Excellent. Dimmer's been brilliant. He's been great for our football club. He come in, he's been excellent for our recruiting team. He's got a really clear plan for us. We've worked closely together and we look forward to working closely together as the year gets towards the trade and draft period.
Thanks for coming on again. You don't go home empty-handed either. You don't get a sheet. He's already got one. But we'll get a mug. So this one's for you.
Thank you very much.
Doubly gettable. You've already been on before, so thanks again. Back to you, Rioli.
All right, a big thanks to Leo Lombard, who's going to be an absolute star in this year's draft class, and also to Kall Burns from the Gold Coast Suns. Before we go, it might be time for you to draft a new podcast into your lineup. Give Between Us a listen with Nat Edwards and Sarah Ollie, spilling the tea on the game's biggest topics on and off the field. It launches on Thursday and will be a fortnightly fix wherever you get your podcasts. A big thanks also to Cal Toomey up on the Gold Coast. Thank you also to Google Pixel for their continued sponsorship of the show, and I'll see you next week on Gettable. Join Kane Corns and myself, Rioli Beveridge, for the round so far, where we bring you all of the results and break down the weekend's events.
All the biggest winners and losers and what it means for them and the competition.
Join us first thing Sunday mornings all season long for the round so far.